Elena Vaughan had grown accustomed to the unpredictable nature of her work at Crestwood Private Urgent Care, a discreet medical practice that catered to wealthy clients who valued privacy over the standard emergency room experience. She had taken the position 3 years earlier, after leaving military service entirely behind her, hoping for a quieter, considerably less chaotic chapter of her nursing career, following years spent treating catastrophic injuries in conditions most civilians could scarcely imagine. That particular evening, her supervising physician received an urgent call requesting immediate medical attention at a private residence on the wealthy outskirts of the city. The caller providing minimal details beyond insisting the situation required discretion and considerable medical expertise. Given the physician's own scheduling conflict, Elena found herself dispatched alone, her medical bag packed carefully as she navigated the winding private roads toward an address she didn't recognize. The estate itself proved considerably more imposing than she had anticipated. Iron gates opening only after careful verification, followed by a driveway lined with serious, watchful men whose posture and careful scanning of her vehicle suggested considerably more than typical household security. Elena felt her professional composure settling into place despite her growing unease. Years of experience treating patients in genuinely dangerous circumstances, helping her maintain steady calm, regardless of her surroundings. She was escorted quickly into the grand estate, a tense, hushed atmosphere permeating the hallways, as several more guards directed her urgently toward a private study where the patient apparently awaited treatment. "He's lost a fair amount of blood," one guard explained quickly, his tone carrying barely controlled urgency. "The wound needs proper attention immediately." Elena nodded professionally, entering the study with her medical bag ready, her attention already shifting entirely toward assessment mode as she prepared to evaluate whatever injury awaited her. The man seated in the room, his shirt removed and pressed cloth held against a wound along his side, looked up as she entered, and Elena felt her entire body freeze completely in stunned, disbelieving shock. She knew that face. She had known it years earlier, under circumstances so entirely different from this elegant, guarded estate that her mind struggled momentarily to properly reconcile the two realities colliding before her. "Eleanor," the man said, his voice carrying quiet, unmistakable recognition, despite the pain evident clearly in his strained expression. Every guard in the room turned sharply at his words, clear confusion evident across their expressions at witnessing their notoriously composed, guarded boss speak someone's first name with such immediate, startling familiarity. Marco, his closest associate standing nearby, studied the exchange with visible astonishment. "Boss, you know her?" Marco asked carefully, clearly unaccustomed to witnessing Alexei display this kind of unguarded reaction toward anyone. Elena, still processing the shocking reality standing before her, forced her professional training to override her stunned disbelief, moving forward automatically to properly assess his injury despite her racing thoughts. "Alexei," she said slowly, disbelief evident clearly in her own voice as she carefully examined the wound along his side. Years of practiced composure, the only thing keeping her hands steady despite her shock. "I never expected to see you again, especially not like this." "Nor I," Alexei replied, wincing slightly as she carefully cleaned the wound, though his sharp eyes remained fixed on her with quiet, genuine wonder despite his obvious pain. Years ago, on a battlefield considerably different from this estate, and now here, treating me once again. Marco and the other guards exchanged increasingly confused glances, clearly struggling to properly reconcile this unexpected, emotional history with the composed, formidable leader they had served for years. "Someone want to explain what's happening?" Marco asked carefully, genuine confusion evident clearly in his measured tone. Alexei studied Eleanor closely as she continued her careful medical assessment, gratitude and profound recognition evident clearly beneath his pained expression. "This woman saved my life," he said simply, his voice carrying quiet, unmistakable sincerity that immediately silenced the room's confused murmuring. "Years ago, when I was considerably younger and working overseas as private security, I took a serious injury during an ambush, and she kept me alive under fire when our own medical support had been entirely cut off." Elena felt her hands pause briefly over her work, old memories resurfacing vividly at his simple, direct explanation. "You were barely conscious when I found you," she said quietly, continuing her careful examination, despite the emotional weight of the memory. "I honestly wasn't certain you'd survive the night, let alone become—" She paused, gesturing carefully around the clearly powerful guarded estate surrounding them. "Do whatever exactly this has become." Alexei allowed a small, genuine smile, despite his obvious pain. "Life takes unexpected turns," he said simply, though something considerably deeper remained evident beneath his measured words. Marco studied the reunion with growing understanding, genuine respect gradually replacing his earlier confusion as he processed the remarkable coincidence unfolding before him. "You saved the boss's life," he said slowly, clear astonishment evident in his tone. "That's considerably more than simple coincidence bringing you here tonight." Elena, finishing her initial assessment, straightened slightly, professional composure returning despite the emotional weight of the unexpected reunion. "The wound needs proper stitching," she said clinically, though warmth remained evident clearly beneath her professional tone. "You're fortunate it didn't hit anything vital, though you'll need considerable rest afterward." "Of course," Alexei replied, though his gaze remained fixed on her with quiet, unmistakable gratitude and something considerably deeper that Elena found herself entirely unprepared to properly process, given the shocking circumstances of their reunion, as Elena began the careful work of properly treating his wound, her professional training guiding her steady hands despite her still racing thoughts. She found herself acutely aware of the guard's continued watchful presence and of Alexei's own quiet, studying gaze that suggested this unexpected reunion carried considerably more significance than either of them had yet properly acknowledged. She had no way of knowing, focused entirely on the immediate medical task before her, just how completely this single, coincidental house call was about to transform her carefully rebuilt, quiet life once again. Once Elena finished carefully stitching Alexei's wound, the room's tension gradually eased, though clear curiosity remained evident among the assembled guards, several exchanging quiet, astonished glances at witnessing their formidable leader's unusual, unguarded vulnerability throughout the entire procedure. Marco, still processing the remarkable coincidence, studied Elena with newfound, genuine respect. "You have no idea what you're looking at right now," Marco said quietly, addressing Elena as she carefully packed away her medical supplies. "The boss doesn't let his guard down for anyone. Not once, in all the years I've worked alongside him." Elena glanced toward Alexei, who remained seated quietly, watching their exchange with careful, measured attention despite his obvious exhaustion following her treatment. "We shared something considerably significant years ago," she said honestly, though she remained deliberately vague regarding the specific circumstances given the sensitive nature of her former military work. Alexei, sensing her careful hesitation, spoke directly, his voice carrying quiet, genuine sincerity despite his evident fatigue. "Perhaps it's time I properly explained," he said, addressing his assembled men directly. "Nearly 8 years ago, before I took over this organization from my father, I spent several years working overseas in private security, protecting business interests in considerably unstable regions." His men listened with visible surprise, clearly unaware of this particular chapter from their leader's past. "During one particular assignment," Alexei continued, his expression growing distant as he recalled the memory, "our convoy was ambushed unexpectedly. I took a serious injury, shrapnel tearing through my side, and our unit's medical support had been separated entirely during the chaos." Elena felt herself drawn back into the vivid memory alongside him. old instincts sharpening as she recalled the desperate, chaotic circumstances of that terrifying night. "I was attached to a private contractor group nearby," she explained quietly, continuing where Alexei's account left off. "We heard the emergency call over radio and moved in, despite the ongoing danger. I found him barely conscious, losing blood rapidly, with gunfire still audible in the near distance. She worked on me directly under fire," Alexei said, genuine gravity evident clearly in his composed voice, refusing to retreat to safety despite the obvious danger, until she had properly stabilized the bleeding enough for safe transport. "I wouldn't have survived that night without her." The room fell into stunned, respectful silence as the guards processed this remarkable revelation, understanding gradually dawning regarding exactly why their usually guarded boss had reacted with such immediate, unguarded recognition upon seeing Eleanor. Marco studied her with genuine, dawning admiration. "That kind of courage isn't something you forget," Marco said quietly, clear respect evident in his measured tone. Elena felt herself flushing slightly under the sudden, considerable attention, uncomfortable with the weight of admiration now directed toward her. "I was simply doing my job," she said honestly, though her modest deflection did little to diminish the genuine respect now evident throughout the room. "You were doing considerably more than your job," Alexei replied firmly, sincerity evident clearly in his composed expression. "Combat medics and nurses face considerable danger themselves, choosing repeatedly to prioritize their patients' survival over their own safety. That courage deserves proper recognition, Elena, not modest dismissal." Elena studied him closely, old memories and current confusing circumstances colliding uncomfortably within her thoughts. "I never expected to see you again," she admitted honestly, "let alone under circumstances quite like these." Alexei studied her closely, something thoughtful and genuinely grateful evident clearly beneath his composed exterior. "Neither did I," he said sincerely, "though I've often wondered over the years what became of the nurse who saved my life that night. I never had the proper chance to thank you adequately before our unit was reassigned entirely." "You don't owe me anything," Elena replied honestly, though warmth was evident clearly beneath her measured tone. "I was simply grateful you survived." Alexei considered her modest response seriously before continuing carefully. "I'd like the opportunity to properly express my gratitude now, if you're willing," he said sincerely, "beyond simply tonight's emergency treatment. Perhaps you'd consider remaining temporarily as my personal medical consultant while I properly recover from this injury." Eleanor hesitated, genuine surprise evident clearly in her thoughtful expression at his unexpected proposal. "I have responsibilities at my current clinic," she said carefully, though curiosity regarding this remarkable, unexpected reunion clearly tempered her hesitation. "I understand completely," Alexei replied respectfully. "I'm simply offering the possibility should you find yourself willing to consider it. I would ensure proper compensation, of course, along with complete flexibility regarding your existing professional obligations." Elena studied him closely, weighing the unusual, unexpected proposal carefully against her own cautious uncertainty regarding his complicated, dangerous world. "I'll need to think about it properly," she said honestly. "Of course," Alexei said sincerely, genuine respect evident clearly in his composed expression. "Take whatever time you need." As Elena prepared to leave the estate that evening, her thoughts racing considerably faster than her outward composure suggested, she found herself unable to fully process the remarkable, unexpected reunion that had unfolded throughout the tense, emotional evening. She had no way of knowing, driving carefully back toward her quiet apartment through the darkened city streets, just how significantly her eventual decision regarding Alexei's unusual proposal would soon transform her carefully rebuilt life entirely once again. 8 years earlier, Elena had been a considerably younger nurse, barely 2 years into her demanding career as a combat medic attached to a private contracting unit operating in a volatile region overseas. She had joined the work initially out of a genuine desire to serve where medical care remained desperately scarce. Her considerable skill and steady composure under pressure quickly earning respect among the hardened soldiers and contractors she served alongside. That particular night had begun as a routine convoy escort, protecting a shipment of medical and humanitarian supplies through territory that had grown increasingly unstable over recent weeks. Elena had traveled in the rear vehicle, her medical supplies carefully organized and ready should any complications arise during the tense journey. The ambush had erupted without warning, gunfire suddenly tearing through the convoy from concealed positions along the narrow mountain road. Chaos and confusion spreading rapidly as the contracted security teams scrambled desperately to establish defensive positions. Elena had heard the frantic radio call almost immediately, a young security contractor's voice carrying unmistakable panic as he reported a man down, bleeding severely, in the convoy's lead vehicle. Without proper time to consider the considerable danger involved, Elena had grabbed her medical bag and moved quickly toward the sound of continued gunfire, her training overriding her instinctive fear as she focused entirely on reaching the wounded man before his condition became irreversibly critical. She found Alexei slumped against his overturned vehicle, blood soaking rapidly through his torn shirt. His consciousness fading dangerously as shock began overtaking his weakening body. "Stay with me," she had said firmly, immediately applying pressure to the worst of his bleeding while bullets continued striking nearby cover, her hands remaining remarkably steady despite the chaos surrounding them. "I need you to keep talking to me. Tell me your name." "Alexei," he had managed weakly, his voice barely audible over the continued gunfire, though his eyes had remained fixed on her with desperate, evading focus. Elena had worked with practiced, efficient precision, stabilizing his critical bleeding while simultaneously monitoring his rapidly weakening vital signs, refusing to retreat towards safer cover despite her own considerable danger throughout the tense confrontation. When the security team finally repelled the ambush after what felt like an agonizing eternity, though likely only minutes had actually passed, Elena had successfully stabilized Alexei enough for safe medical evacuation. She remembered vividly the helicopter's arrival, the relief flooding through her as medical personnel took over Alexei's care, ensuring his safe transport toward proper surgical treatment. She had never learned what became of him afterward. Their unit reassigned to different operations within days, the chaotic nature of their work rarely allowing for proper follow-up regarding patients she had treated during such dangerous circumstances. Now, sitting quietly within her own apartment following that shocking, unexpected reunion, Elena found herself reflecting deeply on how remarkably far Alexei's life had evidently progressed since that terrifying night. From a wounded security contractor bleeding desperately on a chaotic mountain road toward the composed, powerful leader of a considerable criminal organization, she considered his unusual proposal carefully, weighing her own cautious uncertainty regarding his dangerous world against the genuine curiosity and unexpected warmth she had felt witnessing his sincere gratitude and evident respect toward her throughout their reunion. Days later, having carefully considered every aspect of the unusual arrangement, Elena finally arrived at her decision. She returned to Alexei's estate, finding him considerably recovered from his injury, seated comfortably within the same private study where their unexpected reunion had first unfolded. "I've considered your proposal," she said directly, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm willing to serve as your temporary medical consultant, though I want to be clear regarding certain boundaries, given the nature of your work." Alexei studied her closely, genuine respect evident clearly in his composed expression. "Whatever boundaries you require," he said sincerely, "I intend to respect them completely." Elena nodded, appreciating his evident sincerity. "Then we have an arrangement," she said, extending her hand professionally, as Alexei accepted her hand, sincerity and quiet gratitude evident clearly in his warm expression. Neither of them yet realized clearly just how significantly this unusual professional arrangement, born from a remarkable unexpected reunion, would soon evolve into something considerably more meaningful, nor how quickly Elena's medical expertise would prove essential in ways far beyond simple recovery from a single battlefield-reminiscent injury. Over the following weeks, Elena settled into her unusual new role, dividing her time carefully between her existing responsibilities at Crestwood Urgent Care and her regular visits to Alexei's estate, monitoring his continued recovery while gradually becoming acquainted with the complicated rhythms of his considerably different world. She found herself increasingly comfortable within the estate's guarded walls. The initial tension she had felt during that first shocking reunion gradually giving way to genuine, comfortable familiarity. Alexei, for his part, made a consistent point of ensuring Elena felt genuinely respected throughout her time working alongside his organization, never pressuring her beyond the careful boundaries she had established, always expressing genuine gratitude for her continued willingness to assist. Despite the obvious complications her involvement in his world inevitably introduced, "You've been remarkably patient with all this," Alexei observed one afternoon, as Elena carefully checked his healing wound during one of their regular appointments. "Most people would find my world considerably more unsettling than you seem to." Elena considered his observation thoughtfully before responding honestly. "I've spent years working in genuinely dangerous circumstances," she said carefully. "Perhaps that experience has given me a different perspective regarding what genuinely unsettles me versus what simply requires careful navigation." Alexei studied her closely, admiration evident clearly in his composed expression. "That's a remarkably measured perspective," he said sincerely. "Though I imagine my particular world still carries certain ethical complications you find yourself weighing carefully." Elena appreciated his direct acknowledgement of the obvious tension she had been quietly navigating throughout her time working alongside him. "It does," she admitted honestly. "I've dedicated my entire career toward helping people, toward preserving life regardless of circumstance. Working alongside someone whose world involves considerably more complicated moral territory that's required genuine reflection on my part." Alexei nodded, respecting her honest, thoughtful admission. "I won't pretend my world is simple or entirely honorable," he said seriously. "Though I'd like you to know, whatever judgments you form regarding my broader work, I've never once viewed your medical care as separate from the same principle that guided you that night on the mountain road. Preserving life, regardless of circumstance." Elena studied him closely, genuine appreciation evident clearly in her thoughtful expression. "I appreciate you saying that," she said sincerely. "It helps, understanding that you view our work together within that same framework." As their conversations continued deepening over the following weeks, moving gradually beyond simple medical consultation into genuine, meaningful friendship, Elena found herself increasingly drawn toward Alexei's sharp intelligence, his surprising depth of genuine principle despite his complicated world, and the quiet respect he consistently showed toward her own professional boundaries and ethical considerations. Marco, observing this growing connection with quiet interest, mentioned it carefully to Alexei one afternoon. "You seem different since Elena started working with us," he observed. "More at ease somehow." Alexei considered Marco's observation seriously before responding honestly. "She's shown me something I hadn't properly considered in years," he admitted. "Genuine connection, built on mutual respect rather than calculated advantage or fear. It's remarkably rare within my world." Marco studied him closely, genuine curiosity evident clearly in his thoughtful expression. "Do you intend to pursue that connection beyond simple professional arrangement?" he asked carefully. Alexei considered the question seriously, vulnerability entering his usually composed expression. "I'd like to," he admitted honestly, "though I understand the complications involved." Given her evident hesitation regarding my broader world, As Alexei's own feelings toward Elena continued deepening steadily alongside their growing friendship, he found himself increasingly determined to demonstrate, through consistent action rather than empty words, that genuine connection between them remained possible despite the considerable complications his dangerous world inevitably introduced. One evening, following another productive consultation regarding his continued recovery, Elena found herself lingering longer than strictly necessary. Genuine curiosity about Alexei's life beyond their professional arrangement gradually overriding her earlier careful caution. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said carefully, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Of course," Alexei replied, genuine warmth evident clearly in his composed expression. "Do you ever regret the path your life has taken?" Elena asked honestly, genuine curiosity evident clearly in her thoughtful tone. "Given everything I witnessed that night on the mountain road, the man I saved seemed considerably different from the position you now hold." Alexei considered her honest question seriously before responding with equal candor. "Some days, yes," he admitted honestly, vulnerability entering his usually guarded tone. "Though I've also come to understand that circumstances shape us in ways we don't always choose freely. I've tried, within the constraints of my position, to lead with whatever principle and honor remains possible." Elena studied him closely. Genuine respect and growing affection evident clearly in her thoughtful expression at his sincere, honest reflection. Neither she nor Alexei yet realized clearly, however, that her medical expertise would soon prove critically important in ways considerably beyond simple wound care, as troubling patterns within his recent health complications began suggesting something far more dangerous and deliberate than a simple, straightforward injury. Nearly a month into her consultation work, Elena began noticing troubling symptoms during Alexei's routine checkups that seemed increasingly inconsistent with his otherwise steady recovery. Mild tremors in his hands, occasional dizziness, and a persistent, low-grade fatigue had begun appearing despite his wound healing properly, and his overall physical condition remaining strong by every other measure. "How long have you been experiencing these symptoms?" Elena asked carefully during one particular appointment, watching closely as Alexei's hand trembled slightly while reaching for a glass of water. "A few weeks, perhaps," Alexei replied, though clear dismissiveness colored his tone. "I assumed it was simply lingering stress from the injury and my usual business demands." Elena studied him closely, her clinical instincts sharpening with genuine professional concern. "These symptoms don't quite fit a typical recovery pattern," she said carefully. "I'd like to run some additional tests, simply to rule out anything more concerning." Alexei, though initially reluctant given his considerable business demands, ultimately agreed to Elena's careful request, understanding her genuine medical concern outweighed simple inconvenience. The results, once properly analyzed through a trusted private laboratory Elena arranged discreetly, revealed something considerably more alarming than either of them had anticipated. "There are trace compounds in your blood work that shouldn't be present," Elena explained seriously, reviewing the detailed results carefully during a private meeting in Alexei's study. Specifically, markers suggesting exposure to a slow-acting toxin administered gradually over an extended period rather than through a single, obvious dose. Alexei's expression hardened instantly, controlled fury evident clearly beneath his composed exterior as he processed this alarming revelation. "Someone's been poisoning me," he said grimly, understanding dawning with dangerous clarity. "It appears that way," Elena confirmed carefully, "given the gradual nature of the compound's introduction and the relatively mild but persistent symptoms. This has likely been occurring for several weeks, possibly longer." Alexei considered this information seriously, his mind racing through the implications of such a calculated, patient attack. Who would have consistent access necessary to administer something so gradually? He asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the deeply troubling answer. Elena studied him closely, understanding the gravity of what this implied. "Someone within your household," she said carefully, "or someone with regular ongoing access to your food, drink, or medication." Alexei's jaw tightened considerably as he processed this unsettling reality, understanding clearly that whoever was responsible existed somewhere within his own trusted circle. "I need to understand exactly who has that kind of consistent access," he said firmly, already reaching for his phone to summon Marco directly. Marco arrived quickly, his expression shifting rapidly from confusion into serious concern as Alexei explained Elena's alarming discovery. "We need a complete list of everyone with regular access to the boss's food, drink, and daily routine," Alexei instructed firmly. Immediately, as Marco worked quickly to compile this sensitive information, Elena continued researching the specific compound identified within Alexei's blood work, drawing on her considerable medical expertise to understand exactly how the poisoning had likely been administered and what antidote or treatment might properly reverse the gradual damage already done. "This particular compound is relatively rare," she explained carefully once Marco returned with his initial list. "It suggests whoever is responsible has access to considerably sophisticated resources, not simply common poison easily obtained." Alexei studied the list of household staff and close associates with growing unease, understanding clearly that someone he trusted, someone with regular, consistent access to his daily life, had been patiently attempting to end his life over recent weeks. "This changes everything," he said grimly. "We need to identify exactly who's responsible before they realize we've discovered their scheme." Elena, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, felt her earlier careful boundaries regarding involvement in Alexei's dangerous world shifting considerably given the direct threat now clearly evident. "I'll continue monitoring your blood work closely," she said firmly, "and I can help identify exactly which compound this is, which might narrow down who could have realistically obtained it." Alexei studied her closely, gratitude and quiet admiration evident clearly in his composed expression, despite the alarming circumstances. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Your medical expertise may have just saved my life for a second time." As Elena continued her careful investigation alongside Marco's parallel efforts to identify the culprit among Alexei's trusted circle, neither she nor Alexei yet realized clearly just how close the danger had already come, nor that the individual responsible for the calculated poisoning attempt, upon realizing their scheme had been discovered, would soon shift their dangerous focus directly towards silencing Elena herself before she could uncover the complete truth. As Elena and Marco continued their careful parallel investigations, working methodically to narrow down exactly who among Alexei's trusted household staff might have access to such a rare, sophisticated poisoning compound, their combined efforts gradually began pointing toward an uncomfortable, unexpected suspect. Gregory Hale, a longtime household chef who had served Alexei's family for nearly a decade, had recently taken on additional responsibilities, overseeing the estate's private wine cellar and specialty food deliveries, granting him precisely the kind of consistent, unquestioned access the poisoning would have required. Elena, cross-referencing the specific compound identified in Alexei's blood work against supplier records Marco had carefully gathered, discovered a troubling connection to a specialty ingredient recently added to the estate's kitchen inventory, ordered specifically by Gregory himself under the guise of a rare culinary spice. "This matches," Elena said grimly, presenting her findings to Alexei and Marco during an urgent private meeting. "The compound's chemical signature aligns almost exactly with a rare toxin, sometimes derived from this particular plant source. Someone with culinary knowledge would understand precisely how to properly disguise its introduction." Alexei's expression darkened considerably as he processed this devastating revelation regarding someone who had served his family loyally. seemingly for nearly a decade. "Gregory," he said quietly, disbelief and controlled fury mixing intensely within his composed voice. Before they could properly proceed with confronting Gregory directly, however, urgent news arrived that complicated matters severely. One of Alexei's security personnel reported that Gregory had suddenly left the estate that same afternoon, citing a family emergency. His hurried departure considerably suspicious given the timing. "He knows we're getting close," Marco said urgently, understanding immediately the dangerous implications of Gregory's sudden departure. If he suspects Elena's involvement in uncovering this, she could become a serious target. Alexei felt cold fear grip him instantly at this realization. Protective urgency overriding his controlled fury regarding Gregory's betrayal. "Increase security around Elena immediately," he ordered firmly, though even as security personnel moved to comply, his phone rang urgently, Elena's name displayed on the screen. "Elena, are you safe?" he asked immediately upon answering, tension evident clearly in his urgent voice. "I'm fine," Elena replied, though clear unease was evident in her measured tone. "But Alexei, someone's been outside my apartment building. I noticed a car that's been parked there for over an hour, someone watching from inside." Alexei's blood ran cold at this confirmation of his worst fears. "Stay exactly where you are with your doors locked," he instructed urgently. "I'm sending security immediately, and I'm coming myself." Alexei arrived at Elena's apartment within 20 minutes. His security team moving swiftly to secure the surrounding area while he rushed urgently toward her door. Elena opened it quickly upon his arrival, visible relief evident clearly in her tense expression. "The car left just before you arrived," she explained quickly. "But Alexei, I'm certain someone was watching, waiting for an opportunity." Alexei studied her closely, fierce protectiveness evident clearly beneath his controlled exterior. "You're not staying here alone any longer," he said firmly. "Please, come to the estate where proper security can ensure your complete safety." Elena hesitated only briefly before nodding, understanding clearly the serious danger now directly threatening her. "All right," she agreed, quickly gathering essential belongings, while Alexei's security team maintained careful watch throughout the building. Once safely settled within Alexei's heavily guarded estate, Elena found herself reflecting on the frightening reality of how quickly her careful, professional involvement in Alexei's world had transformed into genuine personal danger. "I never anticipated becoming a target myself," she admitted honestly, as Alexei checked on her later that evening, his own composure still visibly strained from the day's frightening developments. "I should have anticipated this risk sooner," Alexei said, guilt evident clearly beneath his protective concern. "I'm deeply sorry for placing you in this dangerous position, Elena." Elena studied him closely, understanding and genuine warmth evident clearly despite the frightening circumstances. "You didn't create this danger," she said firmly, echoing sentiments that felt increasingly significant given everything they had endured together. "Gregory's betrayal did. I don't regret helping uncover the truth, even knowing the risk it's introduced." Alexei took her hands gently, sincerity and fierce determination evident clearly in his intense gaze. "I promise you, Elena, I will ensure this threat is completely neutralized," he said firmly. "Gregory will face serious consequences for both his attempted poisoning and this direct threat against your safety." Working quickly alongside Marco and his most trusted security personnel, Alexei began tracing Gregory's likely whereabouts, determined to apprehend him before he could pose any further danger to either Alexei's own safety or Elena's. As the investigation intensified through the following hours, both Alexei and Elena understood clearly that the coming confrontation with Gregory would finally determine whether this dangerous chapter could be properly, completely resolved. Working through the night with Marco and his most trusted security personnel, Alexei successfully traced Gregory's location to a small rented property on the outskirts of the city. where evidence quickly confirmed he had been working alongside associates connected to a rival organization determined to eliminate Alexei entirely and seize control of his territory during the resulting instability. By early morning, Alexei's forces had surrounded the location, moving carefully to apprehend Gregory before he could flee further or cause additional harm. Gregory, recognizing the futility of continued resistance once confronted directly with the overwhelming evidence against him, offered a desperate, hollow justification. "They offered me more money than I could earn in a lifetime of cooking," he admitted bitterly, resentment evident clearly beneath his fear. "I never intended for anyone else to get hurt. I only needed the nurse silenced before she uncovered everything." Alexei studied him coldly, controlled fury evident clearly beneath his composed exterior. "You poisoned me slowly, patiently, over weeks," he said firmly, "and then threatened an innocent woman's safety to protect your own betrayal. There's no justification adequate for either action." With Gregory secured and the rival organization's involvement thoroughly exposed, Alexei ensured swift, appropriate consequences followed, both for Gregory's personal betrayal and for the broader rival threat that had orchestrated the entire dangerous scheme. Within days, the immediate danger had been completely neutralized. Alexei's own health, steadily improving now that the source of his gradual poisoning had been properly identified and treated. When Alexei returned to his estate following the successful resolution, exhausted but triumphant, he found Elena waiting anxiously, relief flooding through her instantly upon seeing him safely returned. "It's finally over," he said softly, gently taking her hands in his own. "Gregory's been apprehended, and the rival threat behind this entire scheme has been completely dismantled." Elena felt overwhelming relief wash over her, tears of gratitude forming gently in her tired eyes. "Thank goodness," she whispered softly. "I was so worried, Alexei." Alexei studied her closely, sincerity and profound gratitude evident clearly in his composed expression. "You saved my life twice now, Elena," he said honestly. "Once on that chaotic mountain road years ago, and again here discovering a threat that would have eventually killed me had you not possessed the medical expertise and genuine care to properly investigate those troubling symptoms." Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest at his heartfelt acknowledgement. "I'm simply grateful I could help," she said sincerely, both times. Alexei took a steadying breath before continuing, vulnerability entering his usually composed tone. "Elena, these past weeks, working alongside you, rediscovering the remarkable person who once saved my life so selflessly, it's shown me something I hadn't properly anticipated when I first extended that unusual proposal. I've developed genuine, profound feelings for you, feelings considerably beyond simple gratitude." Elena studied him closely, her own heart racing at his sincere, heartfelt admission. "I felt the same way," she admitted softly, genuine happiness evident clearly in her warm expression. "I never imagined that emergency house call would lead towards something this remarkably meaningful." Alexei smiled warmly, taking her hands gently in his own. "Neither did I," he admitted honestly. "Though I find myself endlessly grateful, fate brought us back together twice now, under circumstances neither of us could have properly anticipated. In the months that followed, Alexei and Elena's relationship blossomed into something genuinely meaningful, grounded firmly in the remarkable courage and mutual respect that had first connected them on that chaotic battlefield years earlier. Elena gradually transitioned into a more permanent role, overseeing medical matters within Alexei's organization. Her expertise and genuine principle earning widespread respect throughout his entire household, while never once compromising the careful ethical boundaries she had established from the very beginning of their unusual arrangement. Reflecting quietly one peaceful evening, watching the sunset together from the estate's balcony, Elena considered deeply the remarkable, improbable journey that had reunited her with the wounded soldier she had once saved on a distant, dangerous mountain road, years before either of them could have imagined this unexpected, meaningful reunion. What had begun as a routine emergency house call, transforming instantly into stunned disbelief when Alexei spoke her name aloud before his shocked, frozen guards, ultimately became something neither of them had ever anticipated finding again. Genuine, authentic love, proving clearly that true connection, once forged through genuine courage and selfless sacrifice, can withstand even the passage of years and the most improbable, unexpected circumstances imaginable.